On the night of February 3rd, a Norfolk Southern train carrying dangerous chemicals, including vinyl chloride, derailed about 50 miles outside of Pittsburgh in a little town called East Palestine, Ohio. A huge fire erupted, leading authorities to evacuate local residents and call in organizations like the Environmental Protection Agency, the EPA, to try to contain the situation. The experts on the scene were immediately concerned with the possibility of the highly combustible materials exploding, and so they decided to perform a controlled explosion that would allow them to get rid of the chemicals into an empty trough and into the air in a more safe manner. As of 2 weeks later, the investigation is ongoing and no cause for the derailment has been officially announced as of this recording. The EPA is monitoring the air and the waterways, and they say that while there is still a lingering smell, it's safe for residents to return home. This is all news to you, what I just said, because no one is talking about it. No one. I mean, except for the local newspapers, in and around Ohio, and some national one. I mean, okay, all of the largest newspapers in the United States have been covering the situation for the past several weeks. The New York Times alone has done 4 articles. It was on Good Morning America. So I do, in fact, agree with this Redditor who says, the fact that I haven't seen a news article / broadcast without having to search for it regarding this incident is extremely troubling. That is troubling. What news are you consuming, my dude? Oh, right. Reddit. It's understandable that certain people think that this is a story that is being covered up by the mainstream media. I actually see these kinds of comments on any news story that people feel is important to them, despite the fact that social media allows us to pick and choose our little bubbles. We basically build these little niches that we never actually have to leave. But broader culture can still feel overwhelming. Like, I have no interest in the royals, for instance. I live in a country where we quite formally told them to fuck off 250 years ago or so. But for some reason, I still know that Harry and Meghan live in Montecito, and Harry just wrote a book called Spare. My culture just really, really wanted me to know that, so I know it, and now I can never unknow it. I wonder what my brain pushed out to store that information. Anyway, while the media has reported frequently on the East Palestine derailment, we think of it as a somewhat obscure thing because we aren't absolutely saturated in it the way we are with things that corporations want to sell us, or funny stories that we can meme like Chinese spy balloons. Many people also think that the story isn't being talked about enough because of the possibility of conspiracy. No one died in the derailment, but dangerous chemicals were released into the air, into the ground, into the water. And, we've all seen Erin Brockovich. There's no way the release of these chemicals isn't going to be damaging in some way to the environment, to the health of the residents. And so the company responsible, a multi-billion-dollar company, has every reason to try to cover this up. If you missed Erin Brockovich, just to give you an overview, back in the 1950s and 60s, My Friendly Neighborhood utility company, PG&E, dumped water containing an ingredient called chromium-6, an anti-rust agent. They put it in unlined storage pools in the small town of Hinckley, California, where that chromium-6 infected the groundwater and likely led to an increase in cancer diagnoses amongst the residents. PG&E didn't bother to inform anyone about this until 1987, the same year that a study was published linking the ingestion of chromium-6 and cancer in humans. But PG&E paid a for-profit science firm to publish a retraction of that study under the name of the lead author over his written objections. They then managed to get their own experts appointed to a panel convened by the California EPA to downplay the risks of chromium-6 in drinking water, successfully delaying California from limiting the industry's use of that carcinogen and allowing PG&E to try to dismiss a second lawsuit from another town that they poisoned. So, yeah, can you believe it? Yet another case of a multi-billion-dollar industry buying science in order to prioritize profits over the health and safety of people. So as conspiracy theories go, one could find crazier than Norfolk Southern Railway is a $12 billion company that knows they might be in deep shit for dumping known carcinogens all over an entire town. So they're probably going to use their money and influence to make this all seem safe when it absolutely is not. And if no one is paying attention, no one will notice when this entire town has cancer a decade from now. In fact, you might be interested to learn that we don't really talk about train derailments that much. They are incredibly common here in the US. About 4 train derailments every day. 4 every single day. More like 4.5. And yes, 4.5 derailments every single day seems like a lot, but don't worry, they're not all serious. They don't all spew hazardous materials. In fact, hazardous spills resulting from trains only occurred on average twice a day for the past decade. Now, that might be why you are now seeing, or not seeing, according to TikTok's breaking news conspiracy theorists, reports of other trains carrying hazardous materials derailing in the weeks following the Ohio derailing. In fact, almost 1 decade ago, the exact same thing that we're seeing happen in Ohio happened in Paulsboro, New Jersey. That time, it was a Conrail train, which was also carrying vinyl chloride, also derailed and also leaked the chemicals into the air and directly into a creek that feeds into the Delaware River. Or, as we say where I grew up on the Delaware River, a crick that feeds into the Delaware River. While the residents who weren't evacuated at the time reported feeling common symptoms like headaches and dizziness, weirdly, I can't find any long-term studies done on the health effects experienced by those people. There's no study showing whether or not there was an increase in liver cancer. So it's hard to say whether or not that cleanup was successful. But apparently, Conrail thought that it might have been less than successful because they immediately offered the residents about $500 each to promise not to sue them. A local news station at the time sent someone out to meet with a Conrail representative with a hidden camera. If I signed this and I was to get cancer, what would happen? The resident said. The Conrail representative responded by saying, well, first of all, they would have to prove it was caused by the derailment. And how are they going to prove that? Residents were told they couldn't have a copy of the confidential agreement, but Action News got one. The contract releases the company of any liability for the incident, including unknown injuries spanning from brain damage, dementia, cancer, and even death. I certainly understand why a company wouldn't want to be sued by every New Jersey resident who gets liver cancer for the next 50 years. But if they were operating in good faith, why not at least let people have a copy of the binding agreement they're signing, right? It's reasonable to expect Norfolk Southern to behave the same way in East Palestine, downplay the risks of the chemicals, highlight the difficulty of proving future injury, and get residents to sign away their rights for as little money as possible. And I've seen a few unconfirmed reports that some residents say they have been offered money to promise not to sue. So I really do feel for these residents, even while I disagree with some of the more dramatic reaction from people who frankly have no idea what they're talking about. So with that in mind, I wanted to do a quick breakdown of some popular claims that I've seen surrounding this incident and talk about whether we should or should not be worried about it. So first up, are newspapers covering this up by not reporting on it? No, obviously not. It's in all of the major newspapers, and I think that the reporting has been pretty balanced. There was one reporter who was arrested at a press conference. That wasn't to cover things up. It was literally at a press conference. The reporter was arrested because apparently he was doing a live stream in the back of the room. It was loud. He got in a beef with the cops. It got out of hand. He got thrown out. Second, did hazmat experts purposely poison the residents with that controlled burn? No. Every expert that I've seen discuss this, whether they were there in East Palestine or watching from afar and judging, they all seem to agree that the worst danger was of these train cars exploding and blasting that hazardous material far and wide. Yes, burning off the chemicals released them into the air, which is bad, but air monitors suggest that the most dangerous levels occurred in the actual crash and then briefly during that burn off, and now are back to normal. Not burning it off, according to the experts, would have been much, much, much worse. So how about the ongoing air quality situation? Yeah, that's still a concern. Normal air quality levels overall, it doesn't mean that residents won't still experience irritation and coughing and headaches and things, and they have every right to continue to be pissed about that. They also have every right to be pissed about their chickens and fish and things dying thanks to that initial crash. And, they should be taken care of in that respect. They should be repaid for those animals. They should be compensated, and they should be given free health care. How about chemicals getting into the water? Yes, people should continue to be worried about that. And again, I understand the skepticism around the government keeping a billion-dollar corporation in check here. But we should trust but verify. Trust that scientists are appropriately monitoring the water quality for the chemicals that they should be looking for, and verify that those scientists aren't being stifled, that nothing is being covered up. It would be a pretty big cover up if so. We are all watching, which is good. So we just need to keep watching, make sure that the scientists are allowed to do their jobs. What about this all being a coordinated attack from stage actors to harm the agricultural community known as the Amish by poisoning the rainwater and arable land in the area? Okay, yeah, this one is true. Absolutely. America's greatest enemy, Hamish Yoder, has finally been defeated. No longer will the Amish terrorize us with their soft pretzels and their clever wooden toys. And all we had to do was crash an entire train full of vinyl chloride into a town nearby some of them. Finally, should we be worried that this is the natural result of our government continuing to chip away at employee rights and calls for safety in order to protect multi-billion-dollar corporations? Yes, this is your big anti-government true conspiracy. It's not hidden in the least. Railroad unions have been calling for change for months, for years, for a decade, screaming into the void that there is a ticking time bomb thanks to their employers dramatically increasing both the length and tonnage of the average train while cutting back maintenance and inspection, maximizing profits by sacrificing safety, insisting that trains aren't carrying hazardous materials so long as they're only carrying a few carloads of hazardous materials, reducing workers and increasing their hours until exhausted people are running enormous trains carrying hazardous materials with a skeleton crew that simply cannot respond appropriately to emergencies. And how did our government respond to those frequent calls from the rail unions? By forcing the union to go back to work because the companies refused to do anything and a strike would hurt the economy. So there you go, a real conspiracy about a corrupt government putting constituents at risk to benefit billionaires. Let's focus on that and not get distracted by the fear-mongering. But also, let's keep an eye on those Amish, just in case. Hey everybody, thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this video, please give it a like. If you loved the video, please subscribe. And if you think the world could use more videos like this and you happen to have a few bucks laying around, head to patreon.com/Rebecca and join an awesome community of nerds like the people whose names you see on the screen right now. Thanks.